Right friends, welcome back to Learning Space. This is quick wrap up 11th module. In this module, I have taken 40 statements. I would like to discuss for around 40 minutes. Each statement I would like to take just 1 minute and you will get huge quantum of knowledge through this module. First statement is about gold monetization scheme. Most of you are familiar with gold bond scheme, but majority of you might have forgotten gold monetization scheme. Gold monetization scheme has got three traits. One is short term, second one is medium term, third one is long term. For short term, the interest rate is decided by the respective bank. For medium term and long term, the interest rate is decided by the center in consultation with Reserve Bank of India. Right friends, gold monetization scheme in 2019-20, the mobilization increased substantially. State Bank of India is at the forefront. First part of the statement is correct. Second part of the statement is wrong because medium term and long term, the interest rate is decided by the Government of India. Look at the second statement. Herd immunity. I discussed number of times. Herd immunity can be obtained through vaccination or through natural process or over a period of time. Herd immunity can be developed. Just look at the definition. This second statement gives definition of herd immunity. That means the disease stops spreading in the population if it does not find adequate number of vulnerable people. This is the right definition for herd immunity. The third statement is wrong. Herd immunity is achieved when 50% of the population develop antibodies. This is wrong. It depends on disease to disease. If you look at measles, for herd immunity, 95% vaccination is required. And vaccination in several countries is hovering around 85% or so. Because of that reason, measles resurgence is there in several countries, including India in recent times. So friends, due to lack of the proper vaccination up to the required level, herd immunity could not be achieved as far as measles is concerned, and measles has seen resurgence in recent times. And on similar lines, one should not forget another important point as far as polio is concerned. Vaccine-derived poliovirus that increased in recent times, and vaccine-derived poliovirus that happens when oral polio vaccine is given. Oral polio vaccine is required to eliminate wild poliovirus. But once wild poliovirus is eliminated, it is better to switch over to inactivated polio vaccine. These things are important. Then another point what we have discussed in recent times is hepatitis B. When I talk about hepatitis B, there is high chance of mother to child transmission. Hepatitis C also can be transmitted from mother to child, but in case of hepatitis B, there is a high chance of mother to child transmission. So when you look at other diseases, tuberculosis, government kept the target of eliminating tuberculosis by 2025. Delamanid, bedaquiline, these are the drugs in the news in the context of drug resistant tuberculosis. Bedaquiline, then Delamanid. These are the drugs in the news for treating drug resistant tuberculosis. And all of you are familiar with the HIV virus. When one looks at HIV virus, antiretroviral therapy, one should not forget. And the second one is CD4 count. CD4 cell count or the CD4 T cell count, that will be reduced when the persons are affected with HIV virus. Right? So these are some of the important aspects when one looks at the diseases. And we have already seen hepatitis A and E that spreads through food, water contamination. B, C, D, these are associated with bodily fluids. When blood transfusion is taking place, when the injections are reused, when the injection is used on one person and reused on another person, there is every possibility of B, C, D transmission. Hepatitis C, There is no vaccine for hepatitis C. This is the important point to note. And when I talk about hepatitis B, there is higher chance of mother to child transmission. It is quite often in the news in recent times. Look at the next one. Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram. They do not have biosphere reserves. When one looks at biosphere reserves, Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh, they do not have biosphere reserves. At the same time, if you look at the northeastern part of the country, 4 states, they do not have biosphere reserves. How to remember? 3 states, they border Myanmar. You can remember that way. There's Nagaland as well as Manipur, Mizoram. What are the states bordering Myanmar? There are 4 states bordering Myanmar. Starting from Arunachal Pradesh, then comes this Nagaland, then Manipur, Mizoram. These 4 states have boundary with Myanmar. Out of these 4 states, 3 states, Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram, they don't have biosphere reserves. Similarly, Tripura does not have biosphere reserves. So northeastern part of the country, 4 states have biosphere reserves. What are these 4 states? Assam. Assam has got 2 biosphere reserves. What are these 2? The first one is Dibru-Saikhowa. Dibru-Saikhowa is into the news in the context of some blowout which happened recently. So Dibru-Saikhowa is one biosphere reserve. Second one is Manas Biosphere Reserve. These 2 are in Assam. When you look at the Arunachal Pradesh, that is Dihang Dibang, that is the biosphere reserve. Then Sikkim Kanchenjunga, most of you are familiar. Then Meghalaya. Meghalaya is Nokrek. Nokrek, that is in West Garo Hills. When I am talking about Meghalaya, rat hole mining. Rat hole mining is causing huge water pollution. This is in Jaintia Hills. When I talk about Meghalaya, another point comes to my mind. What is it? Living root bridges. These things are important as far as Northeast is concerned. And let us look at the biosphere reserves towards northwestern part of the country. If you look at the biosphere reserves, Himachal Pradesh, cold desert. And when I talk about cold desert biosphere reserve, Pin Valley National Park, and at the same time Chandratal, these are part of this biosphere reserve in Himachal Pradesh, that is cold desert. And the next one which comes to my mind is Uttarakhand. Uttarakhand has got Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve. So these are important. Then when you look at Andhra Pradesh, Seshachalam Biosphere Reserve. Right? So friends, about remaining biosphere reserves, we will discuss in some other class. So in a nutshell, Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh, no biosphere reserve. Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram, as well as Tripura, no biosphere reserves. Previously, we talked about tiger reserves in the northeastern part. Tiger reserves in the northeastern part, 3 states, Assam, Arunachal Pradesh and Mizoram. Mizoram means Dampa Tiger Reserve. It has no tigers. Right friends, let us move on. Under the coastal regulation zone specifications, all the areas under CRZ3 had no development zone of 200 meters. Absolutely wrong statement. CRZ3 is divided into 2 based on the population. Thinly populated rural areas, thickly populated rural areas. For the thickly populated rural areas, that is CRZ3A, the no development zone is just 50 meters, just like urban areas. So other thinly populated rural areas, no development zone is 200 meters. And at the same time, one should remember, for the creeks, estuaries, all those things, no development zone is just 20 meters. These things we already deliberated in detail. Then inclusive wealth report. This is not released by World Bank. UN Environment that releases inclusive wealth report. Then UNFCCC, CBD, UNCCD, then CMS. These are the conventions emanated out of Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit. Absolutely wrong. Out of the Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit of 1992, 3 internationally acclaimed conventions emanated. What are these 3 conventions? One is UNFCCC. When I talk about UNFCCC, certain things comes to my mind. One is Green Climate Fund, where it is supposed to mobilize $100 billion annually by 2020. That is part of the UNFCCC framework. Paris Climate Pact, all of you are familiar, NDCs, they are supposed to be implemented from 2020, and it is the first legal instrument to set explicit temperature target. Then there's a CBD, then UNCCD. About UNCCD, we are going to discuss in the upcoming classes, as well as CMS. These two are important from your preliminary perspective. But in this statement, CMS is not emanated out of Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit. Out of Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit, 3 conventions came to the forefront. That is UNFCCC, then CBD and UNCCD, and they have well laid out financing mechanisms. That is the most important aspect. As per Ramsar Convention, marine areas not deeper than 6 meters at low tide comes under wetlands. Absolutely correct. As per the Ramsar Convention, another important aspect is wise use of wetlands. And this marine areas not deeper than 6 meters at low tide comes under wetlands. Then in India there is a Central Wetland Regulatory Authority. Absolutely wrong. As per 2010 rules, this Central Wetland Regulatory Authority was established, but it was taken out as per 2017 rules. Now such type of regulatory authorities are available at the state level. At the central level, only some advisory committees are there. So friends, this is the important change when one looks at wetland rules of 2017. Then India ratified Basel Convention. This is with regard to control of transboundary movements of hazardous waste and their disposal. Recent times what is happening? This plastic waste. Plastic waste that is becoming big headache. Several countries like Malaysia, they are sending back the ships going with the plastic waste. In this context, some modifications have been made pertaining to this particular convention. This particular convention is quite old. It is not new. India ratified the convention. The statement is absolutely correct. And keeping in mind plastic waste, this convention, some amendments were proposed recently. In that context, this convention is into the news. India already ratified this convention. Right, look at the next one. As per Union Budget 2021, the fiscal deficit is targeted at 3.5% of GDP. And in recent years, fiscal deficit is on increasing trend. Absolutely correct. If you look at the trajectory of fiscal deficit during the past 10 years, it has reduced drastically, no doubt. From around 6% of GDP to around 3.5% of GDP, it reduced. It hovered around 3.5% for 3-4 years. Around 3.5%. After that, it started increasing. What is the actual fiscal deficit last year? Last year, actual fiscal deficit was 4.6%. That means from around 3.5%, it increased to around 4.6% of GDP. This year, it is expected to be around 7-8% because of COVID-19. So friends, in general, during the past decade, the reduction is there of this fiscal deficit as percentage of GDP. It came down from around 6%. If you go back 2010, 11, something like that, it was 6% of GDP. It came down to around 3.5% of GDP, and it stayed there for 3-4 years. After that, it started increasing. Last year, that is 2019-20, it was 4.6% of GDP, and now it is expected to increase much higher because of COVID-19. Similarly, the other important aspect is CPI-based inflation. CPI-based inflation reduced substantially during the previous decade. Around 10 years ago, it used to be around 10-12% of GDP. Now it came down to around 4-5%, and now it started increasing recently. These type of trends are fancy for UPSC. So during the past 10 years, consumer price index based inflation that fell down substantially from around 10-12% to around 4% or so, but now it started increasing, right? So these trends are important. Then another important aspect is savings. If you look at the domestic savings, especially household savings. Very, very important aspect. During the previous decade, gross fixed capital formation or investment expenditure that declined substantially. Domestic savings declined substantially. The reduction in the domestic savings, that is primarily because of the reduction in the household savings. Such type of points are important. Then, dividends by the public sector enterprises. Public sector enterprises, when they announce dividends, some money goes to the government because government is the majority shareholder in public sector enterprises. And it is part of non-tax revenue, absolutely correct. Whereas disinvestment proceeds are part of non-debt capital receipts. Capital receipts, they are bifurcated into two types. One is debt capital receipts. If government borrows from the market, debt capital receipts. Second one is non-debt capital receipts. If government is selling its stake in the enterprises, that is non-debt capital receipts, right? So friends, these things are important. Debt capital receipts, non-debt capital receipts. And I need not explain the minority stake sale and strategic sale. Strategic sale means when the government sells majority stake in the public sector enterprises, that is strategic sale, right? Whatever way the government sells, this is part of disinvestment proceeds. They are part of non-debt capital receipts, right? And exchange traded funds, or you can say when the public sector enterprises, they form as some sort of exchange traded fund, and then if the stake is sold like that, that is also part of this disinvestment proceeds. Then if one public sector purchases another public sector, that is also part of disinvestment proceeds. When the government is selling enemy shares, that is also part of disinvestment proceeds, right? Then there is perceptible decline in the center's tax receipts as percentage of GDP in recent years. Friends, till up to 2-3 years ago, please listen carefully, till up to 2-3 years ago, center's tax receipts as percentage of GDP, they increased. Now they started declining. 2 years ago, they were 11.2%. Subsequently, they reduced to 10.9%. Now they are expected to be 10.6% this year, but they will fall further because of COVID-19. So friends, there is perceptible decline in the center's tax receipts as percentage of GDP in recent years. Prior to that, prior to 2-3 years ago, they were increasing. But now there is perceptible decline. The percentages also I have written here, 11.2 to 10.9, 10.9 to 10.6. This 10.6 may further decrease because of COVID-19. I hope you got clarity. Then another important aspect is out of the total center receipts or center's tax receipts, if you take total, the direct taxes are higher than indirect taxes. Very, very important aspect. The direct taxes are higher than indirect taxes. In recent years, government's dependence on small savings to bridge the fiscal deficit is on continuous decline. That is wrong. Continuous increase. That means if you look at the 2021 original budget estimates, that means if you look at the 2021 original budget estimates, the total budget is 30 lakh crores of rupees, out of which 8 lakh crores is the fiscal deficit. And how the government will bridge the fiscal deficit? Government will bridge the fiscal deficit in number of ways. One is majority of the fiscal deficit is bridged through market borrowings. It borrows from the market. Other one is it is borrowing from the small savings. In recent times, the government's reliance on small savings that increased substantially. So please correct this statement. In recent times, the government's increase on small savings to bridge the fiscal deficit that increased substantially. Then, in general, subsidies as percentage of total expenditure are on continuous decline during the previous decade. Absolutely correct. 2 points I would like to tell you. During the previous decade, the central government subsidies as percentage of total expenditure, they reduced from around 16% to around 8% or so. Let me repeat once again. During the past decade, these subsidies as percentage of total expenditure, they declined from around 16% around a decade ago to around 8% now. So there is substantial decrease in the total expenditure on subsidies by the center as percentage of this total expenditure. Or you can say subsidies as percentage of total expenditure, they have seen substantial decline during the previous decade. Absolutely correct statement. So this subsidies as percentage of total expenditure, they are on continuous decline. Please correct this statement. This statement is given increase. One more point I would like to tell you. In recent times, the mobilization through extra budgetary resources, that is on continuous increase. And the third important aspect is union budget that follows cash-based accounting but not accrual-based accounting. These 3-4 points are very, very important. Now the deposit insurance cover for the bank depositors is rupees 5 lakhs. Previously it was rupees 1 lakh. Now it is increased to rupees 5 lakh. So friends, deposit insurance cover for the bank depositors is rupees 5 lakh. And who monitors this? Or which is the organization which looks at this deposit insurance? That is DICGC. That is wholly owned subsidiary of Reserve Bank of India. If I deposited in some bank, that bank collapsed, I will get up to rupees 5 lakh. That is the meaning of this statement. In recent times, total annual production from horticulture sector exceeded the production of food grains. Absolutely correct. This is the statement made by the minister in the parliament. The horticulture produce, that was around 310 million tons, whereas total food grain production was around 280 million tons. Another important aspect, rice largest, around 115 million tons, wheat around 102 million tons, and the third component is coarse grains, then pulses. Then Sagar Mitra, this is the program to involve youth to form fish farmer producer organizations. The government proposed fish farmer producer organizations. By the by, when one looks at fish, 2 points comes to my mind. First one is fish, which is the largest producer. Andhra Pradesh is the largest producer as far as fish production is concerned. Wheat, Uttar Pradesh. Then soybean, Madhya Pradesh. Groundnut, Gujarat. Then mustard, Rajasthan. So these things one should keep in mind. Then household savings rate declined substantially during the previous decade. As I have already told you, the total domestic savings rate. Domestic savings rate has got several components. Listen carefully. Domestic savings rate has got components of household savings, government savings, then private sector savings, like that. So out of the government sector, private sector, or you can say, if you look at government sector, private sector, they have not reduced. But the most important aspect is this household savings that declined substantially. Government savings, then the private sector savings, they were almost at the same level. There may be minor change, but we are talking about substantial change. This household savings rate that declined substantially, because of that overall domestic savings rate that reduced substantially. For a resident Indian citizen, very important, recently there was apprehensions raised when the government proposed 182 days to be reduced to 120 days as far as resident status is concerned. That is the story around 7-8 months ago. And from your exam perspective, for a resident Indian citizen, the income tax law applies to the worldwide income of that person. That means if the person is resident Indian, right, then the income tax law applies to that person for the worldwide income. He may be earning some money abroad. On that also, this income tax laws will be applicable. For the non-resident Indian, the income tax law is applicable for the income earned in our country only. This is the major difference. Then, the logistics cost at present is around 14% of GDP, and government's intention is to reduce the logistics cost to 10% by 2022. Please correct the statement. Here it is given 6%. So the government intention is to reduce the logistics cost to 10% of GDP by 2022. Then NIRVIK. Quite often you come across this. This is Niryat Rin Vikas Yojana. This is to provide insurance cover guarantee up to 90%. Because exporters have several risks. When the insurance cover guarantee is increased to 90%, then they can get affordable credit for the export produce. For the exporters, they get credit when proper insurance facility is there, because exporters face several risks abroad. For that purpose, to increase the insurance cover guarantee up to 90%, this NIRVIK or Niryat Rin Vikas Yojana, this is intended. Then another important aspect is World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index. I need not explain anything about it, because India jumped from around 140 to 63 rank. This is a great achievement, but two more points I would like to add. One is distance to frontier. That is the dynamics, or that is the parameter associated with this Ease of Doing Business Index. Distance to frontier score, that is also a parameter associated with Ease of Doing Business Index. And as far as Ease of Doing Business Index is concerned, till now, in India, it is based on the parameters in two cities only. One is Delhi, other one is Mumbai. But we are faring very badly in these areas. Enforcing contracts, our rank is 163. Then registering property, our rank is 154. Then, after the reduction of the corporate taxation rate to 22%, two things I would like to tell you. India abolished dividend distribution tax. Previously, dividend distribution tax was there, and as per the recent budgetary announcement, dividend distribution tax was abolished. That is the first thing you should not forget. Second is, as far as corporate taxation rate is concerned, for the manufacturing companies which are going to be established afresh, please listen carefully, for the manufacturing companies which are going to be established afresh, the corporate tax rate will be 15%. Of course, cess and surcharge will be added. And for normal companies, the corporate taxation rate is 22% in our country. Previously, 30%, and for some small companies, it was 25%. But now uniformly it was brought down to 22%. In our country, the corporate taxation rate is 22%. For the new manufacturing companies, it will be 15%. Of course, cess and surcharge will be added. And look at the statement now. The Indian corporate structure now is in general compatible with those of major emerging economies. Absolutely correct. Now, after the reduction from 30% to 22%, now our taxation structure is almost compatible with other emerging economies. Some of the economies may have high, some of the economies may have low taxation structure, but in general, our taxation structure now, as far as corporate taxation rates are concerned, they are almost compatible with major emerging economies. Then, in India, in general, due to COVID-19, the direct economic stimulus given is much lower. Direct economic stimulus given is around 1% of GDP, though Atmanirbhar Bharat package is total around 10% of GDP, but direct economic stimulus is around 1 to 2% of GDP as per various estimates, and several experts say it is around 1% of GDP. I am talking about direct economic stimulus. Then it is much lower, and economic contraction is much higher in comparison to several emerging economies. Absolutely correct. Economic contraction in the first quarter, which is the COVID-19 hit quarter, that was around 24%. So economic contraction is much higher and the direct stimulus is much lower when we compare with the other emerging economies in general. The statement given is absolutely correct. Then both foot and mouth disease and brucellosis are zoonotic diseases. Absolutely wrong. Brucellosis, that is zoonotic disease. Now in China we are talking about brucellosis. So it is zoonotic disease. Brucellosis, that is because of bacteria. The persons, whoever are coming in contact with farm animals, they are susceptible. And if we drink unpasteurized milk without heating, if we drink, then there is every possibility we may be affected by brucellosis. Brucellosis is because of bacteria. Brucellosis has got vaccine for animals, no vaccine for human beings. And of course, foot and mouth disease, that is because of virus. Foot and mouth disease, vaccination is taking place for all the animals, whereas for brucellosis, vaccination is taking place for female animals of certain category. This is another difference, because government plan is to eliminate these two by 2025 and eradicate these two by 2030. Then zoonosis, these are the diseases and infections naturally transmitted between people and vertebrate animals. Absolutely correct. This is the definition given in WHO site. Zoonotic diseases or zoonosis, these are naturally transmitted between people and vertebrate animals. Then look at the next one, sickle cell. This is in the news. This has got high nutritious value, and it is the product called Chakramart in Ayurveda, and it is being used for curing cancers and other skin disorders, but not for COVID-19. Sickle cell is into the news in recent times. In India, both payments banks and small finance banks could not become successful is absolutely wrong. Payments banks are not successful because of the faulty business model, because they have to keep 75% investments in the government securities. Government securities interest rates are falling nowadays because of the faulty model. Payments banks are not successful. Now the government said payment banks whichever completed 5 years, please convert it to small finance banks. That option is given. Small finance banks are somehow successful, you can say, till now. And another important aspect is small finance banks, 50% of the loans should amount to up to small value, that is 25 lakh rupees. Then the priority sector lending is 75% as far as small finance banks are concerned. Small finance banks are sectoral or differentiated banks. They are not universal banks. Payments banks are also differentiated banks. Payments banks are not successful because of the simple reason that their faulty business model is there. Then the coal-based power plants, there were circulars with regard to coal-based power plants to use this biomass pellets. Biomass pellets in the coal-based power plants, they can be blended with coal up to the extent of around 5 to 10%. 25% is wrong. In recent times, NTPC issued the circular. First it thought of 10%. Later on it issued circular with 5%. And in this context, this biomass pellets, they can be used up to the extent of 5 to 10% only. You can conclude 25% is wrong. Then participatory notes. In foreign land, somebody wants to invest in Indian stock market, but he has not registered with the SEBI. Here one point I would like to tell you. Foreign portfolio investors, they are required to register with the SEBI. After that, they can invest in the Indian stock market. And some persons on the foreign land, they have not registered with the SEBI. How can they invest in Indian stock market? There is one route, that is participatory notes. Participatory notes are issued by the foreign portfolio investors to the overseas investors who want to invest in Indian stock market. Then this GSOMIA, it was signed long back by India and USA. Then LEMO, each other's facilities can be utilized. Then COMCASA, this facilitates encrypted communication equipment transfer from United States of America to India. So friends, GSOMIA, LEMO, then this COMCASA, these are the foundational agreements signed between India and USA. One more foundational agreement is left over, that is BECA. BECA is Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement for Geospatial Cooperation, and this is yet to be signed. Please correct this statement. This statement is wrong. This is the fourth foundational agreement proposed to be signed between India and USA. One more statement. Policy repo rate has seen continuous decrease in recent times. Policy repo rate, it is around 4% or so at present. It has seen continuous decrease during the past 1.5 years at least, and it came down from around 6.5% to 4% now. This is policy repo rate. If you look at during the past 5 years, it is almost on continuous downward trend, except for some brief period where it increased from around 6% to 6.5%. During the past 1.5 years, it is declining from 6.5% to around 4%. And friends, policy repo rate, monetary transmission is not taking place. When the repo rate is reduced substantially, that is not transmitted in the reduction of the interest rate structure in the economy. So therefore you can conclude proper monetary transmission is not taking place because of that precise reason. Instead of MCLR, for some of the loans, RBI in fact directed the banks to take up external benchmark as the reference. There are 4 options given for the external benchmark. And look at the further part of the statement. Is applicable for both banks and NBFCs. Absolutely wrong. Here, this repo rate, this is applicable for the banks, not for NBFCs. Look at the next statement, NPCI, that is not for profit company. Please correct the statement. There is mistake at the beginning. NPCI, it is not for profit company, and it is the umbrella entity for digital payments. It is promoted by RBI and Indian Banks Association as a consortium of 6 public sector banks and 4 private sector banks initially. Now the government is considering, or you can say specifically, Reserve Bank of India is considering establishment of the for-profit entity for the digital payments. In this context, this is into the news. So NPCI is not for-profit entity for digital payments set up by RBI and Indian Banks Association with the consortium of this 6 public sector banks and 4 private sector banks. Then 1/3 of the strength constitutes quorum in GST Council. Absolutely wrong. GST Council is the constitutional body. Half of the weighted average strength that constitutes quorum. And all of you are well aware, 1/3 weightage that is given to the center, 2/3 weightage that is given to the states, and half of the strength constitutes quorum. And whoever present and vote, 3/4 is constituted as the majority for passing anything, right? International Platform on Sustainable Financing. Who started it? This International Platform on Sustainable Financing. This was started by European Union, India, China and other countries. Friends, what is the purpose of this platform? The purpose of this platform is to harmonize the rules. Very important. It is not to mobilize investments. It is to harmonize the rules. What is green investment? The definition is not crystal clear across the globe. So therefore, what constitutes green investment? To look at the definition, to look at the harmonization of the rules, this platform is intended. It is not to mobilize green investments. The statement is wrong. Look at the next one. Public sector entities should procure at least 25% from MSMEs, because recently government changed 25% procurement from MSMEs, 3% from women entrepreneurs, and the companies which are having turnover of rupees 500 crore and above, they should be on the TREDS platform, Trade Receivables Discounting System. Through that, by using the invoice, small companies, MSMEs, they can get loans, right? That is the idea of TREDS. One more important aspect is 2% interest subvention on the incremental loans, that is also there to give thrust to the MSMEs. Then Rakhi Gari, prominent site of Harappan civilization. This is in Punjab. Recently in the Union Budget, India announced 5 areas to be developed as the iconic places. Out of these 5 iconic places, this Rakhi Gadi, this pertains to Harappan civilization. This is in Haryana. Please correct this statement. It is not in Punjab. It is in Haryana. Right? And 4 more places are there. We will discuss in the upcoming lectures. Global Forest Resources Assessment. This is released by FAO once in 5 years. The recent report pertains to 2020. And the next important aspect is globally, the forest resources are on decline, but in India they are increasing. This is as per the report. I hope you got clarity. We learned so many aspects through this lecture, and 12th module, please to join. We are going to discuss on similar lines. Have a nice day. Thank you.